The Gwart Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs. Ellipsis Labs is building a world where mainstream finance happens on-chain. Their first product, Phoenix, is a fully on-chain limit order book DEX on Solana doing hundreds of millions of dollars in volume. I know this team personally. It's one of the strongest in the space. If you're interested in working with a team that's here to stay, Ellipsis Labs is hiring engineers passionate about DeFi to join their team. You can find Ellipsis Labs on Twitter at ellipsis_labs or head to ellipsislabs.xyz to learn more and apply. Hello, I am here today with C-Node, also known as Colluding Node, from Twitter. There is a little bit of context to this conversation, which is that C-Node and I did an interview about a month or two ago, and we decided it just wasn't as interesting as we would have hoped for. So today we're coming back and hopefully give the audience, whoever the audience is, what they want to hear. So, C-Node, do you want to introduce yourself, and we can get started?
Yeah, I'm C-Node. I'm the world's most annoying crypto software engineer. Love blockchains, been working on them for years, been a long time cryptocurrency enthusiast, big Twitter shit poster, really into blockchain, zero knowledge proofs, privacy, scaling.
Nice. We got a lot of buzzwords right in the intro. So
yeah, AI, ZKML, what else? All that. Modular.
Restaking.
Yeah, restaking.
C-Node, what do you think blockchains are good for? I think you have some strong opinions on this, and I think that you and I have some very similar opinions on this. So I want to hear what do you think we are trying to do here with blockchains?
I think blockchains are useful for digital transactions between mutually distrusting parties and pretty much nothing else. I don't really believe that composability with lots of different apps is a particularly strong selling point for public blockchains. I don't think auditability is a unique differentiator of blockchains. I think a lot of the things that people praise and herald blockchains for being able to do are overrated, or things that you could achieve with Web 2 centralized systems, etc. And so really the only unique thing that they can do is digital transactions between mutually distrusting parties.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get much more into that, but I want to just quickly ask: have you always felt this way? And the reason I ask is I don't know how long you've been developing in crypto, but have you had your mind changed about this, or have you always generally felt that this is the only practical use case?
No. Yeah. There have been times where I've thought differently, for sure. Of course, I got started from Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was just money, payments, currency. And I thought that was exciting enough to want to get into the space and learn about it. Years later, I did fall for the Gavin Wood Kool-Aid, the Web3 stack, where we're going to have IPFS storage, Ethereum as compute, so on and so on. And all the internet is going to be decentralized, etc. I was into doing primitive Ethereum-based social networks like PeepETH and Leroy forever ago. And I briefly was into that whole vibe, but I kind of got bored of that. And I worked on a project which was technically DePIN. I worked on LivePeer in 2019. I was an intern there. DePIN is certainly a real thing, and they're bringing it back now as a big selling point / use case for blockchains, and it is certainly very real and very interesting. And the idea that if you have a wide open permissionless marketplace for infrastructure services, it could outcompete centralized competitors is a very real and legit thesis. But I think it's the crowdsourcing aspect rather than the decentralized aspect that makes that possible, right? I think you could make a centralized Helium or a centralized Hive mapper, and basically you'd have exactly the same economics, possibly even better products UX. And that the decentralized aspect is really, I fear that it may only be necessary to stop these things from getting shut down, and have them be resilient and censorship resistant, and not really so much like practical, tangible product things that we say they are.
Yeah. Well, we can come back to the maybe we'll come back to the deep end stuff later, but you've been okay, so like I feel like you are an Ethereum bull, or at least I often see you like posting on Twitter and you seem like on the side of Ethereum. So like that's like kind of vague, and I'm not exactly sure precisely what I'm alluding to, but that's kind of what I've gathered. But what I want to ask then is like Ethereum. So like, as you know, like when Ethereum started, it was sort of Vitalik saw Bitcoin as money. Like, you know, he was like I don't know, like a contributor to Bitcoin Magazine. Like he certainly saw this, and his notion was, like we can do a whole like suite of applications, and we can decentralize a whole lot of stuff. So I'm curious, like now that you kind of, I don't know, I don't want to like put words in your mouth if you like come back around, but like you still seem like quite optimistic about Ethereum as a general statement, and like it seems that payments are like a very small, like peer-to-peer transaction, like functionally is like a relatively small part of the Ethereum mission ecosystem. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. I think Ethereum's valuation is certainly based in a widespread belief that it can do a lot more than just be currency. I like Ethereum because I think it's actually pretty good at currency. And I say that because there exists this stablecoin on Ethereum called Liquidity, LUSD. And it's a governance minimized stablecoin that really no one controls. It's a frozen autonomous smart contract that lets you mint USD against unstaked ETH, which is fully decentralized crypto asset. And this thing is so big that it has a supply of 200 million. Ethereum has enabled a totally decentralized USD that no one can take away from its holders to exist and grow to the size where it has a supply of 200 mil. Of course, you know, it's not completely perfect because it does depend on oracles that make honest majority assumptions. But I think it's like in the most cypherpunk USD stablecoin that exists. And there's a good reason that it's on Ethereum and not on Solana or Cosmos or Avalanche. And I think that has to do with ETH's history. Like ETH started out as proof of work. It did a pre-sale, but like so much time has passed that basically the distribution has gotten good. I think it's probably the second most like widely circulated cryptocurrency after Bitcoin. And the fact that it has enabled this stablecoin to exist, as well as a lot of other protocols that are without governance. Tornado Cash, for example, privacy protocol that is, at least the V1 of it was immutable contract without governance as well. And so a lot of really powerful stuff has been built on ETH.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. We'll come back to the privacy stuff in a bit too. I know you have like some strong opinions on this, but I want to ask then, do you think, like, so it's interesting because oftentimes people bring up Liquidity. Like I know Liquidity, and people bring this up as like, this is the canon of decentralized stablecoin. And like, from my understanding how it works, like it does seem like they don't even host a front end, right? Like there's like a number of different front ends you can act like, I guess, client side access through. So like, I mean, it really does seem to be like fairly mission driven in that sense. But like, I guess, you know, this kind of begs the question, like, okay, so people bring up like, it's like the default. People say, oh yeah, it's like Liquidity. Like this is a prime example. And I think you're right. This is a good example, but like, you know, does this justify like the immense amount of the rest of, you know, stuff that's being built on Ethereum? And like, do you see any value in, so like Tornado Cash seems obvious, Liquidity, like a pretty decentralized stable coin. Like what about the rest of DeFi? Like, do we need this stuff in order to, because I mean, this is what drives the overwhelming majority of fees and activity on Ethereum, right? Like, do we need this in order to enable like what you and I may see as just like, oh yes, like private self-custodial payments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So DeFi is interesting. I do like DeFi. I think it's a little bit overrated though. I'm excited about it to the extent that it makes payments better. Like liquidity is DeFi. It's cool that you can bridge Bitcoin to Ethereum and do financial things with Bitcoin, because a lot of people want to save in Bitcoin and then manage their position, get loans against it, etc. I mean, it's very cool that that's possible. Sure, perps even is if people want to do that, that's great. I don't think any of that is particularly transformative. I think it's a cool thing that some sophisticated finance nerds are gonna benefit from, but I don't think that on its own is really the like delivering this transformative power of cryptocurrency that has propelled our space to such heights.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess one thing that's like come up more recently, and like we were talking about privacy a second ago, and now I'll kind of cage this in a different way. Like I see all of this DeFi coming on chain, and I see like all of these financial primitives and like all of these ways for people to do little financial engineering games. And like, how do you reconcile this with the hope that we have the ability to transact privately? And I mean, it doesn't seem like the direction we're moving is one in which we're optimizing for, say, private DeFi, and like a lot of I just have reservations about putting like all of the financial activity in the world like on a blockchain.
Oh yeah, I would completely agree. I don't think that it's really makes sense to try to replace all trading activity, even crypto trading activity, with on-chain trading. I don't think that a decentralized exchange will ever kill Binance. I think that's not very likely. And yeah, sure, most of the usage on Ethereum is probably trading. It's probably swaps and all of that, and that's probably why the burn is so high, and why the revenue to public blockchains is as high as it is. I believe that will go away. I believe that the rampant speculation, the meme coins, all this stuff is probably a fad. It just has all the hallmarks of a fad. It has all the cultural indicators of being like silly bands or pogs or beanie babies, something like that. I'd be very surprised if like this level of speculation lasts for the rest of our lives, and even that it is the main use case of blockchains for the rest of our lives. I would hope to see, and I'm optimistic that payments usage as currency could grow enough to sustain high revenue to public blockchains and keep these things sustaining themselves. I think like if all the trading activity was replaced with payments activity, I think that would definitely keep the party going, and I'm optimistic that could actually happen.
Yeah, and like I would pretty much agree with most everything you said there. I mean, yeah, I mean it's rampant speculation, right? The thing of it is like it's persisted for quite some time, and like the very reductive way to look at this is like when you can costlessly print tokens and just like keep the Ponzi going. I mean, a little bit critical here, but like when you can just keep this going, it's like as long as the cost of printing a token, which is roughly zero, is less than the marketing or whatever, like this will persist. And I think, I mean, do you see this? Like, I want to ask, like this like whole meme coin thing has been sort of beaten to death at this point, but like, do you see this as sort of like late stage speculation? But I mean, it clearly is, but like, do you see this as being like one of the final sort of frontiers that we cross before people realize like, oh, okay, like this is really just what we're doing here, and we start to converge back on maybe some of the use cases that seem viable?
One way I think it could end, like there's no way. I just think there's no way that this is going to last for the rest of our lives. One possible way it could die is it loses to Web 2. Like, what if all meme coin trading was served by, like, I don't know, maybe like a Las Vegas casino company figures out they get like a license to like legally operate like a meme coin launching and trading platform, right? Like, and then they just deliver a way better product than we're capable of doing because blockchains are so difficult and so hard to make them usable and user friendly and friendly product experience. So like, I don't know, maybe there is a genuine like unconscious human desire to create and trade and gamble on these things. And maybe like the crypto industry will lose that niche and it'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that like the key differentiator is the permissionless aspect. Like, I think that is 100% like the defining factor, is that you can just permissionlessly gamble on this stuff, right? Like, it's not like I think so I'm mainly agreeing with your point though. It's like the decentralization of these platforms is like a very low on the priority list of the people engaging with them. But the fact that you can get some ETH or Sol or whatever, and just once you get it on this wallet, you can just really go at it in terms of gambling. Like, that to me is like the unlock. And so, I mean, I would generally agree. I guess it really is like sort of a regulatory arbitrage there, right? Like, this is what you look at 99% of crypto, and it's like largely the fact that centralized entities cannot offer this stuff. So I think that permissionless aspect is really like what unlocks this. I don't know. Would you like, how do you feel about that? Like that's how I see it.
Yeah. So like, the scenario I just said where like a centralized company serves this niche better than Web3, like the reason why like you and everybody else doesn't think that's going to happen is precisely that. Yeah, it's a legal arb. But the thing with legal arbs and loopholes is that they tend to get closed, especially when there's money to be made. Somebody like maybe MGM, the operators of all the casinos in Vegas, they're gonna be like, oh, there's a lot of money to be made in satisfying this niche. So let's work with the government to get a license so we can capture it. And similarly, the government's going to be like, oh, the exchanges are letting people on ramp to what is essentially the exact kind of gambling that we don't want to allow. They're going to crack down on it. And again, it just seems like absurd to me to believe that this is going to continue for the rest of our lives. Like there's like these very easily closable loopholes and lots of money to be made. So I don't know. I just don't like the permissionless aspect is like, they're nice enough to let us have that permissionless aspect. They don't have to be. And there's a lot of money to be made in changing that.
Thanks for listening to The Gwart Show on the Blockspace Podcast Network. Subscribe to our newsletter at blockspace.media to get the show directly to your inbox. Show links, transcripts, and Bitcoin articles twice per week. Stay ahead of the conversation by visiting blockspace.media.
What do you think about some of the regulation? Like, I guess in the past, I don't know, 6 months, it seems like we've seen a lot more, at least like headline wise, we've seen a lot more like regulatory come down like on our industry. How do you feel? So like, I think we can kind of agree on that just objectively. But what I want to ask you is like, how do you feel about the people who are lobbying regulators and Congress? Like, do you feel like these people are fighting for what maybe you and I care about?
Good question. I'm really happy with Coin Center's work. I think Coin Center's lawsuit against OFAC is exactly the kind of activism that we should be doing. I care the most about ensuring that like the Fourth Amendment, First Amendment, etc., are protected. I think that a lot of what we're doing is we're fighting to defend those principles. And, if they're attacking, our human rights through through cryptocurrency software, that's really bad. That's what keeps me up at night. I care a lot less about the ability for Coinbase to continue making money. I care a lot less about our ability to fundraise through the financial system with token launches. I wouldn't like, I love that we can have an industry, and I love that I can work on this stuff full time. But, governments regulate businesses, and I'm not one of these mountain libertarian guys who's going to say like, you should just be allowed to run whatever business you want. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. I'm not gonna take a stance on that. What I will take a stance on is protecting our free speech and right to privacy. I think those are sacred, and that's what this is really all about. And like, that's what we need to make sure that we do our job of protecting those things and helping people get free speech and speak freely and avoid surveillance.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. But so then, it kind of does beg the question to me. Like, I look at what's being built. So, like, I look at the easy on-ramp that Coinbase has from fiat currency to their exchange to now their, sort of proprietary L2. And I think about like how they want to bring everything on chain, right? Like, this is the entire premise. Like, food on chain is apparently a thing now. And I look at this and I just wonder if the amount of money, I think it's like, the clear answer is no, but like, is the amount of money flowing into lobbying and sort of regulation that we care about anywhere near the amount that we see for like these big businesses who want to build, who like they're beholden to their shareholders, right? Like, they want to maximize their own revenue. And so it's just like, it's concerning because like, I agree with you. Like, I know you have this sort of stance, which is like, at the end of the day, like, if we can build these tools that are useful when the time comes, that would be great, right? Like, if there's a way to opt out when there is this like massive regulatory clampdown, but like, I'm curious if it's like justified to assume that like these large corporations care about any of this stuff. Like, I would almost go as far as saying like, I don't know that Coinbase, I think it's almost directly against like their utility function to care about privacy. And so like, I wonder, like, is all lobbying for crypto good?
Yeah, you're right. I think, rulings against things like Tornado Cash are certainly bad for all centralized crypto companies in the US for the most part, if I had to guess. So I believe that they did. I believe that Coinbase is fighting for Tornado Cash in the US.
Yeah.
And that's great. I'm very thrilled that they're like aligned enough with the people to be doing something like that. Of course, it's out of profit maximizing behavior. Definitely, it's because it affects their business. But like, yeah, I don't know, if you go on a long enough time horizon, it's, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if these companies would actually just like double cross us and end up advocating for some sort of legal framework that would actually like be very horrible for human rights.
Yeah. I think that's more what I'm getting at. Like, I think you're right. Like, I think that Coinbase contributed to the Tornado Cash lawsuit. Like, I'm not being intentionally critical there. I'm just like, when we hear about like, oh, we need a regulatory framework, it's like, there's nothing in my mind that makes me believe that the regulatory framework that is financed by large corporations that have an interest in sort of dominating and creating moats around crypto, like, I don't believe that they care about peer-to-peer like private transactions. Like, I just don't like, and this is why I sort of like, I bring up this, on-ramp to like the Coinbase L2. Like, I fully believe that their intention is to like keep people there, right? Like, they make money by keeping people there. And at the end of the day, it's like a bottom line item for them. It's like, they make money from this sequencer. So it's like, it's fairly straightforward, like in that sense. And I don't even fault them, like in a sense, like they're just, maximizing their revenue for shareholders. But it does seem to me that like I'm very skeptical that like any of these arguments for like a practical regulatory framework benefit us. And like in many ways, I think they can be quite dystopian when you're putting all this stuff on a massive transparent ledger,
Yeah, I mean, like, Lord knows whatever the fuck SBF was doing with all of his like policy stuff 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. You've been like sort of, I wouldn't say critical, but you've like talked about Circle. Like you feel like this is I think you're the way you phrase this is good. Like you call it sort of like this is.
I say that Tether and USDC are not crypto products. They're not cryptocurrencies. I say they're fintech products.
What do you think about like the continued proliferation of like centralized stables? Like, is this good or is this? I don't know. Like, I mean, ideally, we're using decentralized stables, but like, how do you feel about this in general?
Well, I mean, I like to be provocative on Twitter by like saying that they're like tools for surveillance and that they're like, really bad. But I don't know. I mean, I think if they're here, use them. So like use them while they're here, but like I don't think they're going to exist in their current capacity for the rest of our lives. Again, to go back to that, like currently, 2 totally undoxed, anonymous, non-KYC'd people in other countries can get USDC from Uniswap because like they can just swap it for ETH or BTC or something that is very widely distributed. And they can send each other USDC. And functionally, this is equivalent to like a bank transfer or a Venmo payment, except with no KYC. So it like functionally accomplishes money transmission without any sort of AML KYC requirements. And like, again, I'm not a lawyer. Jesus Christ, I'm not a lawyer. But like this just seems like something that won't be allowed. It just seems like something that won't, that they're not going to let this exist for very long. And also I'll bring this up as well. So last night we had this event and there was a startup called Pay. It's with 2 Ys, pay with 2 Ys, and their product is a user-facing payments app, fully shielded ZK private payments, all USDC, and it's actually crazy. They're like a very legit startup, and they have a non-backdoored private shielded pool with using USDC. And I don't know if Tornado Cash even had USDC. I feel like it did not. So I mean, Railgun of course supports any ERC20, so like it's possible to get privacy with USDC, but I feel like this is a contradiction that's going to come to a head eventually, is if you get like a significant amount of these kinds of coins in like privacy apps. I don't want to use the word mixer.
Yeah, well, that's like pretty encouraging in my mind. You seem more bullish on stables. Like, generally speaking, would you agree? Like stablecoin payments as opposed to crypto payments, or am I reading too much into that?
No, you're totally right. So, like I said before, I got interested in Bitcoin originally, and I became interested in other blockchains like ETH as a way to solve various problems with Bitcoin, one of which is this thing is too volatile to actually pay people with. If you live in a country with reasonably stable currency like we do. Yeah. I just don't want to hold exposure to this volatile asset if I just want to use it to buy things at the store. And so I viewed decentralized stablecoins as like a way to solve that. And it's different than the whole resist fiat currency attitude that is prolific in Bitcoin circles. It's sort of like that has never really been what has motivated me. I've not really been one of these guys who's trying to resist centralized monetary policy altogether. I'm really kind of just trying to resist censorship and surveillance. That's kind of my whole thing. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's really interesting. I just don't know enough. Like I'm not one of these historians of monetary policy who can tell you all about how the banking system works. I'm not smart about that topic. Truthfully.
Yeah, no. I think like you're on like the same ideological path. I think that just, I do get kind of, when I hear about like money separated from state, that actually like that gets me pumped up, like truly, right? And I know that in the interim, I say in the interim, like, my long-term vision is a money separated from state that is a hard money. But in the interim, like I completely agree, like stablecoin payments are they are the solution for the time being, and they've proven themselves to be the solution, right? But when you say like, so you talk about liquidity and you talk about like decentralized stablecoins, these need backing, right? Like, is there, I mean, yeah, so these need backing from like some non-fiat issued currency effectively.
Oh yeah, that's right. Like you can try to do Terra. I think at this point we don't want to try that anymore. Let's just declare it dead. Don't do that. And then but then there's the over collateralized crypto backed style, like Liquidity, where it's backed by 110% of its value with unstaked ETH. I think this works really well. Liquidity's been around for years, and the peg has remained mostly close to $1 throughout all of the volatility and collapse and market cycles we've had over the last 3 or 4 years. So I see it empirically working very well to at least remain pegged. There is the capital efficiency criticism, which I could rebuttal against that if you want to.
No, because I don't really care about that either. Like, I think that's an oft-used, argument. It's like, oh, the capital, like, it's not capital efficient. But like, to me, like, for example, like the premise of like lending real Bitcoin, right? Like, so maybe, Rapid DC is fine. Like, but lending Bitcoin and then spending in dollars, like this is a compelling idea to me, right? Because like you're saving in like what I consider to be a harder currency, and then you're spending in what is a softer currency. And like the premise that it's like, oh, it's not capital efficient. It's like, well, for the long run, like I'm not looking to use this to like lever up 1,000,000 times, right? Like it. So what are your thoughts on Maker though in that regard? Do you think Maker's just like sort of gone down the wrong path?
Oh man, Maker is, man, like when Maker first came out, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And honestly, like when Maker came out, that's kind of like when I started really trying to like get into the space, because that was like the first decentralized stablecoin that I heard about, and I was an early user of it. Yeah, I think it went down the wrong path. Absolutely. I think like right now it's 50% backed by USDC. And the reason they did this is, it's pretty obvious why. It has governance. It has the MKR governance token. Everybody who holds that is profit maximizing. So doing the most decentralized thing is never going to be the way to maximize profits. So, of course it's going to get corrupted. If you don't want it to get corrupted, you have to do it Liquidity style. The other thing is, it's like, maybe if USDC becomes a problem, maybe we could have faith in Maker governance to fix it. So like, I'm not completely black-pilled on Maker. I feel like maybe if you have these humans in the loop who are participating in governance, maybe they will be trustworthy and they will protect this thing from threats of censorship or capture or what have you. But I'm just more excited about the autonomous ones that don't have any humans in the loop that are profit maximizing.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to transition into like your thoughts on governance tokens. Give me your thoughts on governance tokens, C-Node.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on governance tokens are downstream of my thoughts on governance as a whole. I think that any protocol with governance is worse than its governance minimized counterpart. Like I just said, I prefer Liquidity over Maker because Liquidity has no humans who are going to ruin it. And then if something has governance, like there needs to be a token, or I guess not, theoretically you could do governance some other way, but like oftentimes governance is used to justify the existence of these tokens. A lot of the tokens that people trade are governance tokens. So like a lot of the crypto trading that we were talking about earlier,
exactly.
The rampant degenerate speculation is on these tokens that are inherently bad.
Yeah, like couldn't agree more. I think the notion that governance tokens need to exist, like I talked to Tarun about this, right? He's very much so in the governance sphere. It's like, it's really predicated on an idea that I just like don't agree with from first principles or like whatever, buzzword you want to use. Like it's just not something that I think is functionally true. And there is evidence that this is not functionally true. Like there are protocols, right? Like open source protocols that people contribute to without the need for a financialized token. Like look at Linux, look at Lightning Network. I mean, and you could get some argument, well, like Lightning would be better with a token. Like I don't think that's true. Like, and the reason people contribute to these is because they find the protocol is useful. And I think that like one of the problems is that people think that decisions can't be made without some type of, financialized incentive. And the reality is like, it really should be almost the opposite, in my opinion. Like this always sort of devolves into a plutocracy or like something more akin to a traditional corporate structure, which is fine if you're trying to run a business. It's not as fine, I think, when you're trying to like create a decentralized protocol, right? And like if you can't decide on the parameters for like a lending protocol or something, like the very like obvious solution is like, okay, if you want Curve to be collateralized at like, only be able to take out 25% against a Curve token, and somebody else says no, we should allow 40%. Like, okay, like you copy and paste the open source protocol, and you guys go and use that one, and like, but this is not at all the direction that you see in crypto. Like, I mean, and this is why, like, yeah, I think I'm rambling a bit now, but like, I think it's like why I enjoy talking to you is because like I think you see the same thing. It's hard to like continue to take this seriously when all we see is more and more of these governance tokens and like this fixation on like figuring out ways to govern more democratically or, fairly. I'm like, no, like you don't understand. Like, I don't want to govern at all. Like, don't put that responsibility on me. Like, nobody should be governing. But like, what keeps you going when you see just like a proliferation of this?
Oh man. Again, like people create startups and they raise for startups by selling tokens and raising money through the financial system. We might not be allowed to do that forever. Like we just, we have to like, you have to be involved with these like regulated, compliant organizations, and you have to dox yourself if you want to do that. And so like, I don't know. I think there's like a chance that we might not be able to do that forever, and that we all might have to become like underground pirate movement, and stuff will still get built if that's what happens. Like, there's going to be way less, probably 99% fewer participants and interest and attention in the space, but like it's not going to go away. So I don't know. That's one thing that keeps me going. I also think that like, governance, internet native shareholder corporations is cool. Like maybe you can have a DAO that's cool. Maybe you can have a lending protocol where you have some elected structure, maybe plutocracy that is responsible for updating the parameters, and maybe you as a user want to use that and you are willing to trust them for that. That could be cool and great. It's just not transformative. We already have that in TradFi. Like, it's cool that now it's internet native and you can maybe even have like some anons who are running it, but it's not transformative. It's the same like fundamental structure as what we had before. So that's why it doesn't excite me, because I think this space is like, we like to be grandiose and transformative and a whole paradigm shift, and that's just not what that is.
Yeah, and it doesn't need like the blockchain aspect of that is like almost not relevant. Like that the human decision making, like if it can't be enforced by the chain itself, like it's functionally a return to exactly what we have now. So I mean, yeah, it's hard to reconcile some of this sometimes. All right, like I want to ask you. I'm not going to ask you to name names, but I wanted to ask you about something you tweeted. You said Ethereum chose a scaling roadmap that requires some neutral infrastructure to be built, but it's being built by mega grifters. Yeah, no need to cast aspersions, but if you want to give like the general impetus for this tweet, I'm quite interested.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So like, I guess it's just just a vague sentiment that I was just putting out into the void. Maybe I was a little bit bored that day and I just wanted to get some notifications, but like, Solana, they scaled with all the stuff that they built. They built the Turbine block propagation protocol. They built the Solana virtual machine. Imagine if they didn't. Imagine if they left the VM up to the market and they said, let's encourage different startups to make different VMs for Solana. And now instead of the SVM, you have 5 different VMs that all are their own venture funded startup with their own token. These guys are going to compete against each other and they're going to create confusing marketing materials and they're going to create all this complexity and ugliness. And forget about liquidity fragmentation. Let's just talk about just like social mindshare fragmentation. It didn't have to be this way, and now it's just become confusing. Forget about the liquidity fragmentation criticism. Forget about the UX criticism. They're competing with each other. They're like making up lies about each other. They're exaggerating each other's shortcomings and exaggerating their own merits, and it just has become so incredibly confusing. And that I don't like. I think that's really quite bad for the whole space.
Yeah. Do you see a solution to this?
We just gotta wait. We just gotta wait it out. Like, the market is gonna like probably converge on something that's a lot more sleek and unified. And it's just, unfortunately, we set that back, and it's a mess. A little bit of a mess. I mean, I'm really I actually quite love all the work that all the layer 2 teams are doing. The engineers were all friends, and like nothing but like love for everybody who's actually building fraud proofs, CK proofs, sequencers, etc. But like, just the fact that it's kind of like startup product business token driven is not the best way to do it.
Yeah. I just don't like these open source public goods, if you will, have been built out in a certain way. And I think you are spot on that they didn't have to be built this way. And like, I think one thing, which of course is subjective, but like, prior to maybe like the most recent influx of like Bitcoin, L2, multi-sig, like sort of EVM copies, like a lot of Bitcoin development has been more in the vein of like this, like truly open source, I would say, idealism. Like Lightning, is like been funded by VCs to some extent, and there's like big companies working on this, and actually they all have their like implementations, and it's sort of a cesspool, like trying to get people to agree on like the real like Lightning implementation and stuff. But like for the most part, this hasn't been like token driven. This hasn't been like fueled by, yeah, I would agree. This like fragmentation of like cultural ideals and trying to push users and then like sort of moat them off into your own like segmented L2 or whatever. Well, okay, let's pivot for a second to Solana. Like you did spend some time working on Solana. I see you often chirping back and forth with Tolly. Like, what do you think? Is Solana doing a good job? Or, I mean, I think you certainly have some reservations about some things that Solana is doing.
Yeah, it's funny. Nobody has anything bad to say about Solana anymore. It's not cool to be negative about Solana in 2024. I've never been like negative about it. Maybe at times I have, just to sort of get attention. But, I spent a year and a half working in that ecosystem full time, and weirdly, like I sort of got back to like the ETH, and I mean, I don't work at ETH, I work at Celestia, but I sort of got into the rollup world by following the scaling debate was going on. I remember I watched the debate between Anatoly and a few other like, I guess, like kind of roll up people at Breakpoint, and I was like, oh, this is the criticism of Solana from the other side. So I wanted to like really understand the criticism of Solana from the other side, because back when I was an ETH dev, we all were like, this is expensive and slow. We wish it could be faster. And then there was this chain that came out and it was cheaper and faster. I was like, oh, great. Are we done? Is this it? Did we solve everything? Why or why not? So I just sort of got really sucked down that rabbit hole, and I saw these arguments from the other side that were about like, it's too expensive to run a full node. And so I was like, oh, why? Why is it too expensive to run a full node? And like, can you really scale without raising the cost of running a full node? And I kind of arrived at the conclusion that I came to, which is that I don't care about full nodes, but I do care about keeping these systems verifiable. And so now I work on working on the underlying technology for trust minimized light clients. And, like I said, the engineers were all friends. I'm very close with the guys who are working on Tiny Dancer, the Solana Lite client. Gone back and forth a lot with them. I'm very excited about that project, and I'll defer to Vitalik's Endgame article, which I think applies here as well. There's one way to scale a blockchain, and there's 3 different ways you can get there. One of the ways is you just take a big so-called monolithic blockchain and you build light clients for it. The other way is you take a normal size blockchain and you have gigantic roll-up sequencers. Pretty much. And then Vitalik goes into like how, fragmentation gets solved naturally by MEV, the incentives created by MEV. I don't know about that, but like the gist of it is that you have big people producing the blocks and you have small people verifying the blocks. And so yeah, I don't know, no hate. Respect for all the builders.
So was that like your primary reservation about Solana though, or your continued reservation about Solana was that it's, as of right now, it's expensive to run a full node, and also there's not sort of these light client implementations yet? Like, would you say?
Well, I mean, yeah, like I would say like I probably seemed more negative about it back when I was still trying to figure all this stuff out. I spent a long time like trying to get to the bottom of it through like having dialectical conversations on Twitter, where I may have seemed like a critic. Right now, though, like we got to be honest, nothing's ready yet. Ethereum is not like Ethereum's full nodes are also too big. If people don't run them, they're too big. I arrived at the conclusion that if you actually care about this end goal, it needs to be effortless to run nodes, not just easy, not just cheap, effortless. It actually needs to be spoon fed into the apps that people do use. So to show my work a little bit, we're trying to make the light client sync instantly using ZK proofs, and then try to get it to the point where we can hide it in the wallet, and it's so small that like it's literally unnoticeably small. And I think that's like the only way that the verification like end game is actually going to materialize. And I don't think Solana is incapable of getting there. But like we're not there yet either, so I'm not going to throw stones.
When you say we, are you talking about your work at Celestia light clients? I know that was like a big.
Yes, yeah. I would say yeah. Like we haven't completely kept that promise yet, but we're busting ass on that, and it is real.
Yeah. So to you, like, because this, correct me if I'm like using the incorrect term here, but like this is sort of like an SPV, right? This would be the equivalent.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's exactly the same idea. Is you'll run this very light client, and it lets you like verify any transaction or state query that you care about. It's easier on proof of work. With proof of stake, it's a bit harder to do, and that's why it kind of is set back a little bit. Bitcoin SPV wallets have been around since early 2010s. And then there's also like the Bitcoin SPV client it still makes this honest majority assumption, although it's a lot safer to do that with proof of work. With proof of stake, you can't make the honest majority assumption, or I mean, like you know, like it's a bit scarier to do that. So like we want to have ZK proofs or fraud proofs in the light client, and DA sampling in the light client as well. In Bitcoin, if you tried to like deceive light clients by corrupting the majority of hash power, you'd be wasting money because like the exchanges would not fall for your attack, and so doing an attack like that would be very, very costly. In proof of stake, you can have the validators. I don't know, do like forks or something, and create a chain to deceive the light nodes. And if you scale it a lot and you make the block size really big, then you raise the barrier to actually detecting that. Sorry, don't need to get into it too much.
No, that's good. That was quite interesting. And so, do you think that? So you said you think that Solana can get there. It's just so what is the end game for something like Solana? Just like this, you said Tiny Dancer. Like I've heard of this, right? It's like it's a light client for Solana. But who are we trusting then when you're using one of these light clients? Like, or rather, distinguish a light client from a full node. Like there is some slight trust assumption.
Sure. So there's like a classical light client, and then there's a trust minimized light client. And Solana does not even have a classical light client, which is trusting the validator set. It would be a huge improvement, a giant leap forward from the current status quo if they did. So if Solana built a regular like proof of stake light client that trusts the validator set, I would cheer. I would pop champagne to celebrate, because that would be such a big improvement over what we have now. I still wouldn't stop working though, because I still don't like trusting the validator set, because to quote my boss John Adler, your funds are your funds, not the validator's funds. So make sure that you can make sure the validators can't trick you into accepting invalid state.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you one last thing, because maybe this is a little bit out of order, but what are you doing at Celestia, and like what is your goal? I mean, so you're working on light clients right now, but what's your goal long term with Celestia? Like, what do you see as the vision? Is Celestia going to be a DA layer for Bitcoin?
So I mean, like, when you use a blockchain as an external DA layer for another chain, it's basically like the trust assumption of a cross-chain bridge, and that is how a lot of people want to use Celestia. The first product that we had ready was we had a one-way data bridge for Ethereum called Blobstream, which a number of Ethereum L2s are using to reduce the costs. But this has the trust assumption of a bridge, and the same would apply if you use it on Bitcoin, which we actually do want to do. We're interested in the budding roll-up ecosystem that seems to be being built around Bitcoin, and if we can help serve and scale that ecosystem, we will. Our bridge is verified by ZK proofs, so our bridge can actually be deployed to any chain that is capable of verifying ZK proofs. Although the thing that excites me the most is Celestia having its own ecosystem, because the sovereign rollups are actually fully trustless, or like you can actually have a fully trust minimized light client, where actually no one can deceive you or steal your funds at all, which is different than when you use external DA for another chain. So I'm more excited about the things you can build uniquely on Celestia than using it as infrastructure for other chains.
What are actually not? I know there's Celestia DA and there's Eigen DA, but like what are some examples of sovereign rollups being built on Celestia? Like, are there I don't know, they're big names that I probably heard of, maybe.
So right now there's kind of just infra. So there's my team, or the team that I'm on, Rollkit. Rollkit is a sovereign rollup toolkit, an SDK for creating your own sovereign rollup. And then there's another really good team called Sovereign SDK. Sorry, Sovereign Labs, and then they're creating the Sovereign SDK.
Yeah.
And that's similar to Rollkit, very similar product to Rollkit. The difference is that Sovereign SDK is totally built from the ground up to be its own thing, and it's also ZK powered, whereas Rollkit is like meant for the Cosmos stack. So Rollkit is meant to be used with existing Cosmos tooling, and it's currently there's like a crude fraud-proof implementation, but the Rollkit team is actually like very likely going to just put the fraud-proof work on pause because the ZK proofs are getting so good. But yeah, no, there aren't any actual users of these yet. There aren't any actual sovereign rollups that exist. No one has taken these SDKs and used them to launch a chain yet. And there are a number of projects that are doing that and will do that. Another issue is like the infra is still a little bit rough around the edges. We are trying to do some very new stuff that has not been done before. So forgive us for it being currently a little bit rough around the edges. And then the other thing is I think a lot of people just don't see the vision. I think a lot like the sovereign rollup vision is a little bit nascent. And I think a ton of the people who appreciate sovereign rollups have full-time jobs building infra, which is something that we're going to have to like deal with eventually.
Yeah, when you say the sovereign rollup vision, do you mean like app chains, effectively?
Yeah, it's app chains. It's app chains, but like a little bit more secure, more scalable.
What part of the vision do they not understand yet?
Well, I mean, like app chains already are a little bit niche. There's less devs interested in building app chains than there are devs who want to just build regular apps, I think. And then like of those app chain devs, they don't necessarily appreciate sovereign rollups yet, or they just are worried about perceived like platform risk, things like that. I think it's going to be a slow burn, but I think it's a real thing that that I am excited about.
Do you think that the reason that these sovereign rollups or app chains haven't like fully been understood yet is because there's this premise in DeFi, like I say DeFi, I mean it's just one example, right? But like there's this idea in DeFi of like the importance of interoperability and stuff, and maybe they don't understand that this stuff can be interoperable with sovereign rollups. Is that sort of your instinct or what? Because like the reason, like for example, DYDX is its own app chain, right? So like they seem to understand the value of being able to say that nobody can do MEV or whatever, you know? Yeah.
I mean, there's like, I think that's not clear. That's not so clear. Like the DYDX app chain is built with just Tendermint or Comet BFT now it's called. So they just took like a like very off the shelf open source code base for creating a proof of stake blockchain. And then like, I guess the MEV mitigation that they have is because, certain kinds of MEV are very bad for users and they want to be like a good product. I think they're just using social shaming as like their strategy for dealing with MEV. But like whoever controls the ordering of the blocks controls the MEV, and there's like a ton of different ways that you could do sequencing for a sovereign rollup. And people ask us for different things, and like we've had a lot of very different requests from the people who have wanted to build it, and it's hard to please everyone. But like we're trying to make it as customizable as possible, which is a cool challenge. I remember my last job when I was working at Switchboard, the Oracle on Solana. Every time I had a decision to make, I would ask my boss, Dr. Blocks, I would say, like, should I do it this way or this way? And his answer every time I asked was do both and make it a changeable setting. And I would be like, oh, now I got to do it both ways and then figure out how to make it a changeable setting. it was actually like, as hard as it was and as tedious as it was to do that, it paid off really well, because every time we had a user who needed something or wanted to change something, we could just be like, oh yeah, just change the setting. So it's like definitely easier to build software if you make all the decisions for the users. But like if you need to please everyone, then you have to do it like the slow way, which is to make it highly configurable. Well,
I think we got a lot out of this. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think that's about it.
You crushed it. It was awesome. I think this is very enjoyable. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Gwart.